My mother burned my Christmas stocking in the fireplace, threw me out into the snow, and told me to get out of her house while my sister filmed it for content. What she did not know was that I had paid her $725 a month to sleep in a room inside a house my grandfather had already left in my name. My name is Elowen Vale Mercer, and for 29 years, my family called me the burden. But 2 months after they erased my name from their Christmas mantle, a deputy sheriff stood in that same living room, read the deed, and said my name out loud. Chapter 1. The stocking they burned at 6:32 on Christmas morning. I woke up to the sound of my mother dragging a trash bag across the hallway floor. For a few seconds, I thought I was still dreaming. Snow tapped softly against the bedroom window, the furnace clicked somewhere below me, and the house smelled like cinnamon coffee, the way it always did when my mother wanted the morning to look perfect before she made it cruel. Then I heard Celeste Mercer's voice outside my door, low and sharp, telling my father not to let me turn this into one of my crying performances. That was how I learned my Christmas had already been decided without me. My door opened before I could sit up. My mother stepped in wearing a cream sweater, pearl earrings, and the calm face she used at church when she was about to say something unforgivable in a gentle tone. In one hand, she held a black 30-gallon trash bag. In the other, she held the stack of folded sweaters from the chair beside my bed. My father, Graham Mercer, stood behind her in the doorway. He was 57, broad-shouldered, a plant supervisor who could make grown men on a factory floor go silent with one look. But in our house, he had built an entire personality out of looking away. That morning, he would not meet my eyes. I asked what they were doing. My mother did not answer at first. She just opened the trash bag and shoved my sweaters inside like she was clearing spoiled food from a refrigerator. Then she said Christmas was for real family, and she was done letting me poison another holiday. I was 29 years old. I worked full-time as a shift manager at Bayleaf Nursery and Landscape Supply. I had an associate degree in horticulture from Northwestern Michigan College, $13,400 in student loans, and a checking account that always looked smaller at the end of the month than it should have. For 14 months, since my grandfather died, I had paid $725 a month to sleep in that room. My mother called it adult household rent. I had paid $10,150 for that room. And that morning she packed it like I had been trespassing. I told her my clothes did not belong in a garbage bag. She smiled without warmth and said neither did I. My father stepped forward then, not to stop her. He grabbed the half-filled bag from the floor, knotted it badly, and shoved it into my chest hard enough that my back hit the wall beside the closet. Pain bloomed across my collarbone and shoulder. A picture frame on the small dresser rattled, then fell forward onto the carpet. Graham's face changed for half a second. Not guilt exactly, recognition. Like some part of him had watched his own hand and understood what it had done. But he swallowed it, the way he swallowed everything. My mother told him not to get soft. So he picked up the second bag, downstairs. The living room looked like a magazine spread. A 9-foot tree stood in the front window, heavy with gold ribbon and cranberry ornaments. Snow pressed white against the glass. The fireplace burned low and orange. 4 stockings hung from the mantel in a perfect line. Celeste, Graham, Brielle, Colton. Colton Reeve had been living in the house less than a month. My sister's fitness creator boyfriend had already earned a stocking on my grandfather's mantel. I had lived there since I was 18. I had paid rent for the privilege of being treated like a stain. My name was nowhere. My sister Brielle stood halfway down the stairs in matching Christmas pajamas, holding her phone upright. Her hair was curled, her skin was glowing, and the little red recording light on her screen was already on. Brielle was 25, a lifestyle micro-influencer, who called herself a soft family creator when she was not using our family as content. She looked at me through the camera instead of with her own eyes. She said the problem child was finally facing consequences. Colton stood behind her in a gray hoodie, one hand wrapped around a mug that said blessed. He told Brielle to tilt the phone a little more so she could catch the fireplace. My mother walked to the storage basket beside the hearth and pulled out my old stocking. It was cream-colored, with faded silver thread around the cuff. My grandmother Marlene had made it before she died. The letters of my name were uneven because she had stitched them by hand, and for years I had told myself that unevenness meant someone had taken time with me. Celeste held it between 2 fingers like it was dirty. She said I had ruined every Christmas since the day I was born. Then she threw my stocking into the fire. For a moment I forgot how to breathe. The wool curled inward first, then the silver thread blackened. My name twisted, brightened, and disappeared into the flames. Brielle made a small sound behind her phone. Not horror. Satisfaction. Like she had caught the perfect shot. My mother waited for me to scream. She had always liked me best when I was giving her proof that I was unstable. But my grandfather Silas Vale had taught me something different in the workshop behind that house. He taught me that the loudest person in the room was usually begging the room to forget the truth. He taught me to sand with the grain. He taught me to measure twice and cut once. And once, after my mother slapped me in front of 15 relatives at a Memorial Day cookout, he pressed ice to my cheek and told me not to cry where she could use it. So I did not scream. I went back upstairs, moving slowly because my knees wanted to shake. From the bottom drawer of my nightstand, I took the walnut box my grandfather had given me in 2017. It was 12 inches long, handmade, with dovetailed corners and a thin cherry border. He had burned my name into the underside in letters so small I had to turn it toward the light to see them. He had told me not to open it until I needed to. Anytime, any reason, any hour. I took my wallet, my phone, the walnut box, and the trash bag full of clothes my father had thrown at me. At the front door, Graham finally looked at me. He said to get out of their house. I heard those words like a sentence. Their house. Their Christmas. Their family. Their decision. I did not know yet that it was the biggest lie my father had ever said out loud. I stepped onto the porch in wet socks. The cold went through me so fast it felt like stepping into broken glass. Behind me, the door closed before I reached the driveway. My Honda Civic was covered in a thin shell of ice. I scraped a hole through the windshield with an old gift card, threw the trash bag into the passenger seat, and placed the walnut box carefully on the dashboard, like it was the only thing in the world that knew my name. I drove to the Walmart on US 31, because it was the only place I could think of where nobody would ask why a grown woman was crying in a parking lot on Christmas morning. Inside, I bought cheap winter boots, a gray hoodie, a phone charger, and a bottle of water. The cashier wished me Merry Christmas without looking up. In the restroom, under fluorescent lights that made my skin look almost blue, I pulled down the neck of my sweatshirt and took 3 pictures of the bruise spreading across my shoulder. Then I saved them to the cloud. When I opened Brielle's story, my hands went cold for a different reason. There I was, walking out with a trash bag, my face pale, my hair unbrushed, the burned stocking cropped out of the frame. The caption said, "When the adult child finally faces consequences." I screenshot it before she could delete it. Back in the car, with the heat blasting against my new boots, I opened the walnut box. Inside was a brass key, old and heavy, tied to a leather tag stamped with the words "Front, 1971. Beneath it was a business card for Dale Whitaker at Grand Traverse Trust and Savings. On the back, in my grandfather's handwriting, was the number 851209. There was also a black and white photograph of Silas standing in the cherry trees behind the house, holding me as a baby wrapped in a white blanket. On the back, he had written May 18, 1996. Elowen came home. At the very bottom was a folded note, "Call him first. Do not go back to the house." I stared at the phone number on Dale Whitaker's card. It was Christmas morning. No trust office in Traverse City would be open. No bank manager would be waiting at a desk because a woman in a Walmart parking lot had finally opened a box her dead grandfather made. But I called anyway. The phone rang twice, then a man answered, his voice older, careful, awake. I said my name was Elowen Vale Mercer, and I had a card from my grandfather Silas Vale. There was silence on the other end, not confusion. Recognition. Then Dale Whitaker said he had been waiting for that call. He told me Grand Traverse Trust and Savings was closed for Christmas, but Silas had left specific instructions. If I ever called that number on any day, at any hour, Dale was to answer if he could. He asked if I was safe. I almost said yes because I had been trained to make things smaller. Instead, I looked at the bruise on my shoulder, the trash bag on the seat, and the walnut box on my lap, and I said I did not know. Dale's voice changed. Not louder, firmer. He told me to get somewhere warm. He told me not to return to 818 Cherry Bend Road. He told me not to answer my mother, not to sign anything, not to explain anything to anyone in that house. Then he told me to rent a room in Acme Township if I could, keep every receipt, and be at his office at 9 the next morning. I asked him what this was about. He exhaled slowly, like he was choosing between the truth and the amount of truth I could survive in a parking lot. Then he said, "Elowen, before you speak to your mother again, you need to understand something. The house she just threw you out of may not be hers to throw you from." I did not answer. Snow moved across the windshield in thin white lines. The brass key sat in my palm, cold and solid, heavier than any key had a right to be. For the first time that morning, I did not feel completely abandoned. I did not know the truth yet. I did not know about the trust, or the deed, or the papers my mother had spent a year trying to keep from me. I only knew that my grandfather had left me a box, a key, and a man who answered the phone on Christmas. And for the first time in my life, I wondered if Silas Vale had not left me a memory. Maybe he had left me a door. Chapter 2. The rent they had no right. To collect. He rented the cheapest room I could find in Acme Township. A second-floor motel room, with a heater that rattled like loose change and curtains that smelled faintly of bleach. The clerk behind the glass wished me a Merry Christmas without lifting her eyes from the television mounted in the corner. I signed my name, paid with my debit card, and carried the trash bag upstairs like it was luggage I had chosen. The room had one bed, one desk, one lamp, and a mirror over the sink that made every bruise look worse. I put the walnut box on the desk before I put down anything else. My phone kept lighting up beside it. 3 missed calls from my mother, 2 from my father, 7 from Brielle, then a voicemail from Celeste that began with the voice she used on church women and ended with the one she used on me. She said the morning had gotten emotional. She said families sometimes moved too fast when boundaries were ignored. She said I should call before I did anything dramatic. Then her tone changed. She said the money in that bank, if that was what this was about, belonged to the family. I sat on the edge of the motel bed with the phone in my hand and felt something small and cold settle inside me. My mother knew there was money somewhere. Maybe not what kind. Maybe not whose name was attached to it. But she knew enough to be afraid of me finding it. I did not call her back. Instead, I opened my email and made a folder called Christmas Records. I uploaded the pictures of the bruise on my shoulder. I saved the screenshot of Brielle's story before she could decide it made her look cruel. I forwarded myself every Venmo receipt with Celeste's name on it, every $725 payment marked room contribution, December rent, adult responsibility. I learned to save things because my grandfather taught me that people like my mother always counted on everyone else forgetting. We moved into Silas Vale's house in July of 2014, after my grandmother Marlene died at 72. I was 18, just out of high school, old enough to understand grief, but not old enough to recognize when grief was being used as a key. Brielle was 14 and already enrolled at North Bay Preparatory Academy, where the tuition cost more than my first car. Celeste told everyone we were moving in to help her father through the loneliness. At church, people touched her arm and called her devoted. On her blog, she posted pictures of casseroles, folded quilts, and my grandfather's front porch with captions about family showing up when it mattered. Inside the house, she walked from room to room like she was measuring curtains for a place she already owned. I heard her one night in the kitchen, speaking to my father while Silas sat in his recliner in the next room, awake and silent. She said he was almost 70. She said in a few years, everything would finally be settled. Graham told her to keep her voice down, but he did not tell her to stop. Silas heard it. I know he did, because the next morning he asked me to come out to the workshop. The workshop sat behind the house, close enough that you could smell cedar from the back porch when the windows were open. It was the only place in that house where my mother lowered her voice. There were clamps along one wall, old coffee cans full of screws, a radio that only picked up 2 stations, and a leather apron hanging from a nail with a horseshoe-shaped burn near the pocket. Silas showed me how to sand with the grain that morning. He said fighting the wood only made scratches deeper. He said pressure mattered, but direction mattered more. Then he handed me a scrap of cherry and let me ruin it until I understood what he meant. He called me Ruthie Blue when no one else was around. It was not my name, not really, just something he had called me when I was little and came home from the hospital wrapped in a blue blanket Marlene had knitted. My mother hated that nickname. She said it made me sound special. That was probably why he kept using it. Brielle was always the child with a future my mother could photograph. She had dance lessons, acting workshops, new phones, a camera with a ring light before I knew what a ring light was. Celeste said North Bay Preparatory was an investment. When I asked about college, she said community college would be fine for someone practical. I took loans, waited tables, and later found work at Bayleaf Nursery and Landscape Supply because plants made sense in a way my family never did. Brielle got possibilities. I got lessons about responsibility. The summer of 2017 was when Silas stopped pretending not to see it. It happened at a Memorial Day cookout in the backyard. Celeste lost a silver bracelet she had been showing off to the women from church. Before anyone searched the house, she turned to me in front of 15 relatives and asked what I had done with it. I told her I had not touched it. She slapped me so hard the paper plate in my hand folded against my shirt. Graham looked down at his beer can. Brielle laughed because she thought embarrassment was funny when it belonged to me. Silas took my wrist and led me inside. He wrapped ice in a dish towel and held it to my cheek without saying a word for a long time. Then he told me not to cry where she could use it. He told me to save everything. The next day, he gave me the walnut box. He did not explain it. He only said I would know when to open it. I wanted him to tell me why my mother hated me so much. Instead, he pressed the box into my hands and said some doors had to be built before the person needed them. I did not know then that soon after that slap, he went to see Helen Crestwood at Crestwood and Associates. I did not know he placed 818 Cherry Bend Road into a revocable living trust in August of 2017. I did not know he kept the right to live there for the rest of his life, named Dale Whitaker as successor trustee, and wrote my full legal name, Elowen Vale Mercer, as the only beneficiary. I did not know because Silas knew my mother. He knew if Celeste smelled paper with my name on it, she would turn love into pressure and pressure into signatures. So he let me keep thinking the box was only a box. In September of 2024, Silas was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. He died on October 11 at 79. Celeste cried louder than anyone at the funeral. Women from church held her hands. Pastor Nathan told her she had honored her father well. But during the reception, I saw her glance toward Silas's old file cabinet 3 times. 2 weeks later, she called a family meeting at the kitchen table. She said the house could not carry adults who refused to grow up. She said I was 28 and still sleeping under a roof other people maintained. If I wanted to keep my room, I would pay $725 a month. I asked if Brielle would pay too. Brielle had already started using Silas's reading room for lifestyle videos. Colton had moved workout gear into the corner before he officially moved in himself. Celeste said Brielle was building a career. Colton was building a brand. I was building excuses. Graham rubbed his forehead and told me to do what my mother asked. So I paid. Every month from November 2024 to December 2025. I sent $725 to my mother, $10,150 to be tolerated in a room that still smelled faintly of my grandfather's books. Meanwhile, Colton painted Silas's reading room gray, hung LED strips along the shelves, and called it the family content house. Brielle filmed morning routines there in slippers that cost more than my winter coat. At Bayleaf Nursery, I took extra shifts near the end of every month. I opened early, unloaded soil, watered poinsettias until my fingers went numb, and smiled at customers who knew me better than my own parents did. Maya Rios noticed. She was 31, blunt, kind, and allergic to pretending. One night she asked why I always looked sick around the 28th. I told her rent was due. She frowned because she knew where I lived. But she did not push. Maya had a way of letting silence be a place someone could sit down instead of a trap. Celeste, meanwhile, kept writing her little essays online. Adult children who refuse responsibility. Tough love during the holidays. When mothers stop enabling. Mrs. Irene Caldwell from Bible study commented under almost every post, saying strong mothers were a blessing. By the time my phone buzzed again in that motel room, I had uploaded every receipt I could find. Another voicemail from Celeste appeared. This time, she sounded sweet for 12 seconds. She said we had all gone too far and that Christmas made people emotional. Then her voice hardened. She said again that the bank money belonged to the family, not to a confused girl who had always needed more than she gave. I saved that voicemail in a folder labeled Celeste, after Christmas. Then I placed it beside the bruise photos, Brielle's screenshot, and 14 months of rent receipts. For years, saving things had felt like a way to prove to myself that I was not crazy. That night, in a motel room with a rattling heater and my grandfather's box on the desk, it felt like something else. It felt like evidence. Chapter 3, the box, the trust, and the name on the deed. By morning, the motel window had turned white around the edges, and the parking lot below looked like someone had covered it in flour. I slept less than 3 hours. Every time the heater clanked, I woke up reaching for the walnut box on the desk, like someone might come through the door and take it back. By 7:30, I was dressed in yesterday's jeans, the gray hoodie from Walmart, and the cheap winter boots that still had the price sticker half stuck to the sole. Grand Traverse Trust and Savings sat on Front Street in downtown Traverse City, between a closed bookstore and a fudge shop with Christmas lights still glowing around the windows. It did not look like the place where a person's life got divided into before and after. It looked ordinary. Brick front, brass handle, small wreath on the door. Dale Whitaker was waiting just inside. He was 64, with silver hair, a navy cardigan, and the kind of face that had spent years delivering careful news. He did not smile too much. He did not act surprised. He simply opened the door, looked at me, and said my name like he had practiced it. Elowen Vale Mercer? I nodded. I'm Dale Whitaker. Your grandfather trusted me. Today, I'm going to ask you to trust me for about an hour. He checked my driver's license, the business card, the number 851209, and the brass key from the walnut box. He turned the key over in his palm, and something moved across his face when he saw the old leather tag. Silas carried this key for 44 years, he said. He told me you would bring it when you were ready, or when you had no choice. I followed him into a small conference room with a round table, 2 chairs, and a window facing the alley. On the table sat a blue binder, a photocopy of a deed, a certificate with my grandfather's name on it, a cream-colored envelope sealed with tape, and a yellow legal pad covered in Dale's neat handwriting. My hands were cold even though the room was warm. Dale sat across from me and folded his hands. I'm going to explain this in plain English, he said. Your grandfather placed 818 Cherry Bend Road into a revocable living trust in August of 2017. I stared at him. He kept the right to live there for the rest of his life. That's called a life estate. It meant no one could push him out, and no one could sell the house while he was alive. I heard the words, but they slid past me like water on glass. When Silas died on October 11, 2024, the trust became irrevocable. The instructions locked in. He opened the binder and turned it toward me. My grandfather's signature was at the bottom of the page, strong and slanted, the way it looked on birthday cards and workshop labels. Silas named me successor trustee, and he named you, Elowen Vale Mercer, as the sole beneficiary. I looked down at the paper. My name was there, not Brielle's, not Celeste's, not Graham's mine. I said the only thing my brain could find. Does that mean I own part of it? Dale's face softened, but his voice stayed steady. No, Elowen, it means the house is yours. For a second there was no sound in the room. Not the heat, not traffic outside, not my own breathing. The house where my mother had burned my stocking. The house where Colton had a stocking after 3 weeks. The house my father had called theirs while pushing me out into the snow. Dale gave me a moment, then continued gently. Your mother, your father, Brielle, and Colton have no ownership interest. They are not beneficiaries. They are not on the deed. They do not have a lease. He laid out the numbers because paper, unlike family, did not flinch. The house at 818 Cherry Bend Road was valued around $415,000. The payable on death account attached to the trust held $94,600. Silas's workshop tools, cabinet equipment, and old machinery were estimated at $31,500. His 2008 Ford F-150 was worth about $9,800. Before maintenance, taxes, and legal expenses, Dale said the estate value was about $550,900. I thought of my mother calling me a burden while standing under a roof my grandfather had already set aside for me. Then Dale said something that made the room tilt again. The trust account has been paying the property taxes and homeowner's insurance since your grandfather passed. Your parents may have paid utilities. Gas, electric, internet, that sort of thing. But utilities do not create ownership. I opened my phone with fingers that did not feel like mine. I pulled up the folder I had made at the motel and turned the screen toward him. 14 payments. $725 each. $10,150 total. Dale did not touch the phone. He only looked at the list, then removed his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. They charged me rent, I said. His voice was quiet. Helen can advise whether it is worth pursuing reimbursement. I don't want to promise you something that depends on a judge, a claim, and what it would cost to chase. But morally, yes. They were collecting rent from the person Silas chose as the true owner. There it was. Not just cruelty. Not just hypocrisy. A number. A pattern. A monthly receipt for being treated like a guest in my own inheritance. Dale reached for another folder. There's something else you should know. Your mother has been here before. My stomach tightened. 3 times after the funeral, he said. The first time, she asked about family inheritance. The second time, she suggested your grandfather was not in his right mind near the end. The third time, she told me you did not need to know anything. Because, in her words, you don't understand money. I looked at the notes. Celeste Mercer, November 18, 2024. Celeste Mercer, 3rd, 2025. Celeste and Graham Mercer, September 9, 2025. Graham had come with her once. My father had known enough to stand in that office and still told me to pay rent. Dale stood slowly. Silas left something in a safe deposit box. Downstairs, behind 2 locked doors and a wall of metal boxes, Dale opened box 218. Inside was a sealed envelope and a smaller key wrapped in a piece of gray flannel. The letter was in my grandfather's handwriting. I did not read all of it there. I could not. But my eyes caught enough to hurt. If you are reading this, Ruthie Blue, then your mother finally did what I was afraid she would do. I saw the slap. I saw the way they gave Brielle the whole table and asked you to be grateful for crumbs. I saw how your mother looked at this house after Marlene died. I could not make Celeste love you correctly. But I could leave you a door she could not burn. I pressed the letter flat with both hands. Dale looked away, giving me the privacy my own family never had. The smaller key opened a cabinet in Silas's workshop, Dale told me. Not the front door. Not anymore, necessarily. Just something Silas wanted me to have when I went home. Home. The word landed differently now. By noon, I was sitting across from Helen Crestwood at Crestwood & Associates. She was 68, silver-haired, sharp-eyed, and dressed in a black wool blazer that made her look like she had never lost an argument by accident. She already had a copy of the trust. Your grandfather was very clear, she said, and very careful. I gave her the bruise photos, Celeste's voicemail, the rent receipts, Brielle's screenshot, and the missed call log. Helen reviewed them without drama. You do not need to win by being louder than your mother, she said. You need a timeline. She explained the next steps in clean, simple pieces. A 30-day notice to quit would be served. If they did not leave, she would file for summary proceedings in Grand Traverse County District Court. If the court granted possession, she would request a writ of restitution. Then the sheriff would handle the lockout. I asked about my father shoving the bag into me. Helen looked at the bruise photo again. You can report it, she said, and you may still choose to. For now, we preserve it. Your mother will try to turn this into a family fight. We keep it where it belongs. Ownership, possession, intimidation, documentation. When I left her office, Brielle's video had already started moving. At Bayleaf Nursery, Maya texted to ask if I was safe. A customer had seen the clip and asked if I was really making my mother homeless at Christmas. I stared at that message for a long time before typing back. I'm documenting it. That evening, back in the motel room, Helen called. The process server will go out on December 28th, she said. Do you want me to include language demanding that they stop collecting any further rent from you? I looked at the folder on my laptop. Trust certificate. Deed copy. Bruise photos. Voicemail. 14 rent receipts. For the first time since Christmas morning, I almost smiled. I think they already collected their last one. After the call ended, I arranged everything into folders the way Silas had taught me to arrange screws by size in coffee cans. Not because I was afraid of forgetting anymore, because now, remembering had a purpose. The box on the desk was no longer just a box. The key was no longer just a key. And the sentence my grandfather had buried in paper 8 years earlier was finally beginning to open. My name was on the door. Chapter 4. When paper beat performance, the paper did not make the house feel mine right away. For 2 days, it made the world feel stranger. I still woke up in a motel room with a rattling heater. I still brushed my teeth under a fluorescent light that made my bruise look purple and yellow. I still drove past 818 Cherry Bend Road without turning my head, because I was afraid that if I saw the front porch, I would forget what Dale had shown me and feel like a child again. On December 28th, Helen Crestwood called me at 8 in the morning. Linda Kowalski will serve the notice today. I was sitting in my car outside Bayleaf Nursery, holding a paper cup of gas station coffee between both hands. Do I need to be there? No, Helen said. You should not be there. Your mother wants an audience. Do not give her one. At 10:17, my phone buzzed with a message from Helen Dervis complete. I stared at those 2 words longer than I should have. They looked too small for what they meant. Later, Helen told me how it happened. Linda Kowalski was 43, licensed in 3 counties, and had the calm expression of a woman who had stood on too many porches while people pretended not to be home. She wore a small body camera because contested service was part of her job, not because she wanted drama. Celeste was in the kitchen doing Mrs. Irene Caldwell's hair for Bible study. Irene was 67, a widow from church who believed my mother's casseroles proved her character. The subject for that night's study was family forgiveness. Linda handed Celeste the notice to quit. My mother read the first page. Then she read my name, Elowen Vale Mercer, owner and beneficiary. Helen said my mother's face changed before her voice did. That girl owns nothing in this house. Then Celeste tore the notice in half. Linda did not flinch. She simply reached into her folder and removed another copy. Service is complete, Mrs. Mercer. Celeste said she would call the police. Linda said, You may. I have the service packet, 2 additional copies, and the recording. Mrs. Caldwell watched the whole thing from the kitchen chair, her silver hair half pinned, her mouth open, like she had seen something private by accident. That afternoon, my mother began telling the story before anyone else could. Her blog post went up at 3:42. The title was When Adult Children Confuse Independence with Cruelty. She never used my name. She did not need to. She wrote about a devoted daughter who had cared for her aging father, opened her home to a troubled adult child, and then been punished with lawyers after Christmas. By dinner, women from church were sharing it. Mrs. Caldwell texted me. "Your mother is hurting, Elowen. Whatever papers are involved, please do not let attorneys harden your heart." Pastor Nathan Whitfield left me a voicemail asking if I would consider family mediation. His voice was gentle, which somehow made it worse. Brielle was less gentle. She posted herself crying in Silas's old reading room, now painted gray with LED lights along the shelves. Colton stood behind her with one hand on her shoulder, looking grave and useful. "My family is being legally harassed by someone who never appreciated what she was given," Brielle said. Colton added, "This home is full of memories. We are just trying to protect it." He had lived there 26 days. I saved every post, every message, every screenshot. Then I went to work. At Bayleaf Nursery, the poinsettias were half price and the floor smelled like wet soil. I was restocking seed trays when a customer, who usually bought birdseed from me, stopped at the end of the aisle. "I saw your sister's video," she said. "I hope you know what you're doing to your mother." For a second, I wanted to hand her the trust certificate. I wanted to show her the bruise, the rent receipts, the screenshot of my stocking burning out of frame. Instead, I set another stack of trays on the shelf. "I'm not discussing my family at work." She looked offended, as if privacy was the cruelest thing I had done. Maya Rios found me in the back room 10 minutes later. "You okay?" "No. Do you want me to ask, or do you want me to stand here and pretend I'm checking inventory?" That almost made me laugh. "Inventory," I said. So she stood beside me in the smell of potting soil and did not ask questions. When our manager said the online mess might make customers uncomfortable, Maya looked him straight in the face and said I was the most reliable person in the building, and if customers preferred TikTok to payroll records, that was not a staffing issue. I sent Helen everything that night. She replied with one sentence, "Good. Keep building the timeline." Celeste hired Jason Whitfield in early January. He was 32, 3 years out of law school, with an office above a dental clinic and a website that said he handled real estate, family disputes, and small business needs. I think my mother expected him to be impressed by her tears. He was impressed by Helen's documents instead. Helen forwarded me the summary after their first exchange. Jason had received the trust certificate, the recorded deed, tax and insurance records, Dale's notes, and my rent receipts. He told Celeste she had no deed interest, no lease, no beneficiary status, and no legal right to remain if the court granted possession. My mother did not accept that answer. She told him she had cared for Silas. She had paid utilities. She had kept the house presentable. She had made sacrifices. Jason asked for a caregiver contract. There was none. He asked for proof of reimbursement agreement. There was none. He asked Weathers had ever signed anything giving her the house. She said no, but he would have wanted her to have it. That was my mother's favorite kind of evidence. Something dead people could not deny. In late January, Aunt Margie Vale called me. She was Silas's younger sister, 62, retired from bookkeeping at a school district, and allergic to nonsense. "I shouldn't have stayed quiet as long as I did," she said. I sat on the motel bed with my laptop open. "About what?" "Your father asked me after the funeral if Silas had left everything to Celeste." "Not hoped," asked. Like he already knew the answer might be no. My throat tightened. So he knew there was something. He suspected, Margie said. And suspicion was enough to make a decent man ask better questions. Then she told me where the money had gone. Brielle's school had cost about $165,000 over 6 years. Celeste's salon attempt in 2019 burned through $22,000 before it closed in 2020. There had been 3 Las Vegas trips I was never invited on. Colton's workout apparel idea had eaten $8,000 and produced boxes of unsold shirts. Graham and Celeste had about $31,000 left in checking, and his 401k was locked behind penalties he did not want to pay. "They need that house," Margie said. "That's why she's acting like it's love." By early February, we were in Grand Traverse County District Court. Judge Patricia Greaves was 61, with silver glasses and a voice that made people stop decorating the truth. Celeste wore a white cardigan and brought 3 women from church. Graham sat beside her, hands folded, face gray. Brielle stayed in the hallway, posting vague updates. Colton did not come in because, according to Brielle's story, courtrooms triggered his anxiety. Helen spoke first. She was calm and clean. Trust created in 2017. Deed recorded. Silas died October 11, 2024. Elowen Vale Mercer sole beneficiary. Notice served December 28. No ownership interest for Celeste, Graham, Brielle, or Colton. No lease. Jason tried the caregiver argument. He said family homes carried emotional realities beyond paperwork. Judge Greaves looked over her glasses. Was there a caregiver contract? Jason paused. No, Your Honor. Is Mrs. Mercer named on the deed? No. Is she a beneficiary of the trust? No. Is there a lease giving her the right to remain? No. The judge turned one page. Paying utilities or living in a family home does not create ownership. Celeste made a small sound beside Graham, like the air had been pushed out of her. But when the judgment for possession was entered, she did not look defeated. She looked insulted. They had until February 22nd to leave. Outside the courtroom, Celeste stepped close enough that I could smell her vanilla perfume. You may have paper, she said. But I have people. I did not answer. That night, Brielle posted a black screen with white text. Saturday, Mom tells the truth live. I forwarded it to Helen. Her reply came back in less than a minute. Do not engage. The writ schedule does not change because someone goes live. I set the phone face down on the motel desk. For the first time, I understood that my mother had stopped trying to win in court. She wanted a crowd. She wanted witnesses who did not know what had happened in that living room on Christmas morning. And that was exactly where she was going to destroy herself. Chapter 5. The Sheriff. Read my name on February 22nd. My mother went live from my grandfather's living room in a white cardigan, sitting beneath the same mantel where she had burned my name out of Christmas. She knew the sheriff was scheduled that morning. Helen had confirmed the writ days before. Celeste knew the court had already ruled, and she knew the lockout was not a rumor or a threat or one of those family arguments she could smother with tears. But my mother had always believed an audience could turn wrong into sympathy if she cried early enough. Brielle set up the phone on a tripod near the fireplace. The angle showed the tree still half decorated, the family photos, the soft winter light, and the 4 stockings my mother had left hanging, as if the empty space where mine should have been did not accuse her. Celeste, Graham, Brielle, Colton. Colton stood near the hallway checking the viewer count. He had one hand in the pocket of his joggers and the other around his phone, like he was managing a brand crisis instead of standing in a house he had no right to occupy. I was not inside. I was 3 streets away in Maya Rios's car, parked beside a closed ice cream shop with dirty snow piled against the curb. The walnut box sat on my lap. Helen was on speakerphone. Maya kept both hands wrapped around the steering wheel, even though the car was parked. Helen said the sheriff was coming because of a court order, not because of anything your mother says online. Do not engage. Do not drive over there until I tell you. I nodded, even though she could not see me. The live started with a few hundred people. Brielle shared it to her story and 2 local Facebook groups, and within minutes, the number climbed past 2,000. Celeste was very good at wounded silence. She let the camera sit on her face while she dabbed under her eyes with a tissue. Then she began talking about sacrifice, family values, and what happens when adult children let lawyers harden their hearts. Mrs. Irene Caldwell commented with prayer hands. A few women from church wrote that they were standing with her. Someone asked why a daughter would do this to her own mother in winter. My mother leaned into that question, like it had been planted there for her. She said she had opened her home to me. She said she had carried me through my worst years. She said I had repaid her by dragging her into court after Christmas. She did not mention the rent. She did not mention the trust. She did not mention my stocking. Then someone in the comments asked why the judge had sided with me if the house belonged to Celeste. My mother's mouth tightened. Another person asked whose name was on the deed. Brielle shifted behind the camera. I could hear her voice faintly through the live, telling Mom to stay on message. Celeste looked at the screen, and for the first time, the soft mother act cracked. She said after everything I sacrificed for her, she made me burn that stocking because she would not leave peacefully. Maya inhaled sharply beside me. On the live stream, the comments changed so quickly I could barely read them. People asked if she had just admitted to burning my stocking. Someone asked why a mother would do that. Someone else wrote that if I paid rent, they wanted to know who had been cashing the money. Brielle stepped into frame, smiling too hard, trying to redirect. Colton told her to end it. Celeste kept talking because my mother never knew when silence would have saved her. Then came the knock, not a polite tap, 3 firm strikes against the front door. The camera swung as Brielle picked up the phone. My mother stood, still performing, still believing a uniform would hesitate if enough people were watching. Deputy Daryl Hawthorne stood on the porch in a dark green winter jacket, with another deputy behind him and a locksmith near the steps. He held a clipboard, not a grudge. He did not raise his voice. He did not argue with Celeste when she tried to explain that this was a family matter. He read the writ of restitution from Grand Traverse County District Court. He stated the address, 818 Cherry Bend Road. He stated the judgment for possession. Then he said my full name, Elowen Vale Mercer. Hearing it through that tiny phone speaker did something to me I still cannot describe. My name had been laughed at, erased, cropped out, and burned. Now it was being read by a deputy sheriff in the living room, where my mother had tried to remove it. Helen's voice came through the speaker, quiet but firm. There it is. Celeste stared at Deputy Hawthorne like he had spoken a foreign language. Brielle's hand shook so badly the video blurred. Colton backed out of frame. The comments turned into a flood. People were asking if the daughter owned the house. People were asking if my parents had charged the owner rent. People were tagging friends, screen recording, reposting before Brielle even understood what was happening. Celeste turned toward Graham. She told him to say something. She told him to tell them it was their home. My father stood near the stairs with his coat half-zipped, looking smaller than I had ever seen him. He sat down on the second step as if his knees had stopped holding him. He said she owns the house. She always did. Celeste screamed that he had betrayed her. Graham looked at the floor and said he had helped her betray me, and there was a difference. Brielle ended the live then, but it was already too late. By that afternoon, a local drama page had stitched the clips together. Me leaving with a trash bag. Celeste admitting she burned my stocking. Deputy Hawthorne reading my name from the writ. Within 48 hours, millions of people had watched my mother's performance collapse under the weight of paper. The aftermath did not feel like fireworks. It felt like doors closing. Celeste and Graham moved into a 2-bedroom apartment in Beulah, above a chiropractor's office, for $1,400 a month. There was no fireplace. 2 weeks later, my mother shut down her blog because every old post had the same question under it, asking where Elowen's stocking was. Pastor Nathan asked her to step back from the women's group for a while. Mrs. Caldwell sent me a message saying she was sorry she had believed only one side. I did not answer. Brielle lost the skincare deal first. Then the athleisure collab. Then the meal kit sponsorship and the water bottle brand. Colton left her by text 6 days after the lockout, telling her this was not the brand he was building. By March, she was sleeping on the pull-out sofa in my parents' apartment. Graham texted me once. A long message. He said he should have stopped my mother 30 different times in 29 years. He said he had mistaken peace for goodness. He said he was not asking me to forgive him, because forgiveness would be another thing he had not earned. I read it 14 times. I did not delete it. I did not answer. At the end of February, Deputy Hawthorne met me at 818 Cherry Bend Road. The locks had been changed. He handed me a new key on a plain silver ring and said the property was secure. I opened the front door with that new key, not my grandfather's brass one. The house was empty in a way I had never heard it before. No ring lights. No cinnamon coffee staged for photos. No Colton's dumbbells in the corner. No Brielle filming herself in Silas's chair. Just the old floorboards, the smell of cedar, and winter light falling across the room where my stocking had burned. I placed the walnut box on the mantel. Then I went out to the workshop. The brass key from Silas did not open the front door anymore, and that was all right. It opened the old cabinet beside his workbench. Inside were his tools wrapped in oilcloth, the leather apron with the horseshoe-shaped burn, and a cardboard box marked Elowen 2020. Inside that box was a cream-colored stocking. My name was stitched across it in cranberry red thread, uneven and careful. Inside the cuff, in tiny letters, Silas had stitched SV 2020. I held it against my chest and cried in a way I had not cried when my mother burned the old one. That stocking was not a replacement. It was proof that my name had survived somewhere my mother could not reach. I hung it on the mantel. I did not post a response video. I did not call the news. I called Maya and asked if she would help me bring a few young plants into the sunroom when the weather warmed. Then I put on Silas's apron, laid the trust papers on his workbench, and set the brass key beside them. Revenge was not watching my mother lose the house. It was not Brielle losing sponsors or Colton running the moment the story stopped flattering him. The real revenge was that I no longer had to pay rent to exist in the lives of people who hated me. That house was not a trophy. It was a place someone had built for me before I knew I would need it. That night, I turned off the living room lights and left the fire low. My new stocking hung alone on the mantel, not crowded by Colton's name, not edited out by Brielle's camera, not touched by my mother's hands. For the first time in years, 818 Cherry Bend Road was quiet in the way a home is supposed to be quiet. Not because I was swallowing the truth, because I no longer had to prove I deserved to stay. If you were me, would you ever answer Graham's apology? Or would you let silence be the boundary he finally earned? And who do you think betrayed me the most? Celeste, Graham, or Brielle.